Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Extraordinary Family Life Podcast. We're your hosts, Greg and Rachel Denning. We just got back from another iconic,
It's cliche now at this point.
but typical for us, epic adventure.
Bucket list adventure.
Yeah. So we're,
It sounds like totally cliche. Like we just had another bucket list adventure.
another trip of a lifetime.
Another trip of a
We
lifetime.
do 2 to 3 a year.
When you think about all the things we did and experienced, I'm like, yeah, it was.
It was amazing.
It was amazing.
So our little family trip getaway, and this one was interesting for us because we've been working so hard, like sun up to sundown. Actually, before the sun comes up and after the sun goes down, we've been working on getting our new resort up and ready.
The World School Family Resort
And
in
it
Portugal.
is up and ready. So, little side note, you should all come stay here. You should come visit.
Well, okay, so side note, I'm actually going to send out an email soon inviting people to, I guess I'm going to say apply, even though it sounds a little...
Well, no, it's an application process.
Yeah. To apply to come stay for a month or two here at the resort. We're going to
or
do
even just a few weeks.
We're going to do a sort of community type experience. We're going to have homeschooling together. We're going to do some shared activities, field trips. I want to go see the 3 ships. They have replicas of the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Marina Santa Maria, because Columbus left for his journey to the Americas
Just really close to us.
2 hours from here.
Yep.
So we want to go see that. Anyways, so lots of fun ideas I have in the works, and I'm going to be sending an email inviting people to apply.
Basically, it's going to be like, we've all heard for years about these study abroad experiences or student exchange, but basically it's a chance to bring your family.
Family study
and
abroad.
do a little family study abroad.
Yeah.
Yep,
So I'm excited about that.
Totally different experience. And yeah, just come experience the awesomeness of southern Portugal.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. So come stay here. Anyways, we were working so hard on that for about 3.5 months. It was just go
Mm-hmm.
hard. And we knew it'd be temporary. We're getting ready for the summer rush, and it is chock full. The resort is booked out every day, super crazy full. So full, in fact,
that
was
we
part of
are living in the basement.
Catalyst. Well, we're in the basement, and it was part of our catalyst. Like, let's just go. Let's go out and have our family adventure. So it was like a reward.
It had already been planned. It was on the calendar for almost a year.
Yeah.
So we had to do it, quote unquote, had to go.
Poor us.
Also because we were leading a trip there. So we already had people signed up to go on it. But with that context of having worked so hard on the resort, it was nice to take that break. And it was nice because we had to test out our systems. Like to see, because you know us, we love to travel and we want a home base. This is a home base that's also a business, another business. And we didn't want it to tie us down. Like we still wanted to be able to travel. So this was a test. Like, can we leave it with our employees and have it function while we're gone, while we're literally off grid? Because, there's times in Mongolia where
and Kazakhstan and China.
There was almost 2 weeks when we really didn't have very much internet access at all.
Yep.
And then, in Beijing, it was limited because they have all sorts of restrictions. And it worked. I'm so happy about that because it literally worked. We have systems in place that made it possible for them to completely run it while we were gone with little to no interaction from us.
And we had over 30 animals that had to stay
that they
alive.
are taken care of.
All of our new
They all stayed alive.
And
all kinds of plants that had to be watered. Nothing died.
And it's
I was like,
amazing.
yes, success.
Yeah, so amazing. And well, that's just for those of you who are business owners and entrepreneurs, man. There are few things as valuable as good workers, good team members.
And good systems.
And good systems, yep, that support both that. And we have 5, well, we have one virtual of 5 that they are amazing.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
they make so many things possible. So anyways, we went out, we spent a full day, and I think we've mentioned how we created the flight plan. It was just randomly pieced together by Rachel's, how shall we say, expertise, just like the awesomeness of like, oh, well, where are there flights? Where could we go? So we ended up with a day in London, which is
So a
so
trip that
fun.
was supposed to be to Mongolia and back ended up taking us to 5 countries
Yeah.
because, honestly, because it was a lot cheaper to do that, including all the added days, than direct flights from Lisbon to Ulaanbaatar,
Yep.
Mongolia.
It was
So, I mean, it was like bonus,
bonus layovers,
bonus
which we
layovers,
all
bonus
love
trips.
because we get to see cool new things. So we got to experience
So
London,
we went
which
to
was
London for
Hyde
several
Park,
hours,
like stood
which
out
was
to me.
fun. Yeah. The kids loved it.
I loved,
Yeah.
and well, the kids just crazy loved. They're in the trees, and there's all these big. I don't know if they're willows, weeping willows, but there's these big trees where the branches hang down to the ground and they create these little playground caves, and the kids loved it, and so I loved it. It was awesome. Hyde Park was really special. Then 4 days in
Kazakhstan.
Kazakhstan,
We
our
spent
first
four
time there,
days.
and
Yeah.
the mountains, the people, the food.
Gorgeous
Loved
country, at least
Kazakhstan.
where we were. We flew into
Yep.
Almaty, and that's where the mountains are. That's where the lakes are. I mean, it gave me a lot of like Colorado,
Yeah.
Rocky Mountain vibes.
Gorgeous.
Very beautiful, and very few foreigners. I mean, we saw some Russians and other
But only
white
very
people,
few. No
but
English
yeah,
anywhere
very
at all.
nobody spoke English.
Yeah.
Actually, there were a few people that would say, "Hi, how are you? Welcome to Kazakhstan." Like that was about it. But yeah, great experience. They had pretty good food. We tried horse for the first time, which I
good.
was hesitant to eat, but it was actually pretty good. All the kids tried it too, which I was amazed, and they all said, "Oh yeah, it's good actually. It tastes like a steak." So we did that, and then also tried Georgian food for the first time, which was
Wow.
really
There's an
good.
authentic Georgian restaurant there that was amazing.
Makes me want to go to Georgia now. It's higher on the list. Yeah, so
Great.
Kazakhstan was great. I totally recommend it.
Yep. And then, of course, Mongolia. 10 days of pure wonder and bliss. And
I don't know if it was all wonder and bliss, but it was definitely 10 days of adventure. That's for sure.
yep, it was a little beyond your.
I'm not going to lie. It was in a lot of ways a challenging trip for me, which is a good thing. It's good to have challenging trips, but it was lots of rough roads
yeah.
in a Russian van,
Yeah.
no AC, heat, dirt,
like
dust,
bumps,
bumping around. The food was not amazing. It was okay, but not amazing. And
The best, I think, is when they brought a live goat
okay,
with
well,
us.
yeah.
They let us watch the entire process.
Oh, wait, let's get there because, yeah, I want to talk about that. I guess that's part of the reason why, and we've talked about this many times before, the most memorable places and sometimes our favorite places are actually the places that are the most difficult or challenging or foreign.
Yep.
And Mongolia is one of those places, and so everything's different and everything's unique. And but the reason why it was so valuable is because of the sheer beauty. Like you're riding in these Russian vans on dirt roads for days, and it just goes on and on and on. And I kept talking to people. I'm like, it's like Scotland and Ireland and Iceland and the Rocky Mountains all combined into one vast country, and we only saw a very small part of it. Tiny fraction of this country. It's huge.
And you'd get up on these hillsides and you literally could see forever.
Yeah, but then there's also mountains and there's forested places and it has like everything. And it really did remind me of all of those countries. And it's just incredible. And there's more animals than people. It's I think the least densely populated country on the earth, right?
Yep.
It's just incredible.
Yeah.
So that's what made it worth it for me, was just the beauty. And then of course the highlight, I would think, for everybody, including myself, was the horseback riding. So we did 2 days of horses, which originally I thought we were going to do more and I wanted to do more, but 2 days was more than enough because we were all
for bottoms
extremely
that are not used to
sore.
It. Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting that we were all sore in different places, depending perhaps on, I don't know, our own weakness.
Lack of riding skills.
I was sore in my knees. You were very sore on your butt.
Yep.
Aaliyah, our 17-year-old, had a huge bruise on her calf.
Yeah.
But it was definitely a highlight. I just loved riding in nature, like almost untouched nature, except for the nomads. I mean, they had their yurts out there and some horses and cows and stuff, or yaks. It was just
And we
gorgeous.
had fresh
But
yak cream that morning in
yeah,
the middle of nowhere.
and we tried the fermented mare's milk, and we tried the fermented cheeses, which I hate, but you
I love
like.
them. I brought home a bag,
I know
a big bag.
exactly. But so on that overnighters, because we camped near it's called the Eight Lakes region, which is gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. For our dinner, they brought a goat. Now, it was live when it first joined our party, and they just threw it in the van live. And they're like, oh, this is dinner tonight. And we're like, okay. And then at the place where we got on the horses, that's where they slaughtered it. And we watched. It's just this random Mongolian family right there, and they
Just went over
took out all the
to
intestines
the lady and
and
said, "Hey, will you help with this?"
yeah, and she did.
It was like this. It was awesome. This little community process.
Yeah, it was like
The
the
men
men did one part, and then she did another
men
part.
killed it,
Yeah.
and then she cleaned and processed.
Well, and the men pulled out all the intestines, and also I think they scooped out the blood because they did it in a way where nothing was
Was lost.
wasted
So
or on the ground.
I've seen a lot of animals slaughtered and processed around the world. I've never seen a process like this.
Yeah.
They preserved everything. They did
and
not
they
spill
eat everything,
any blood.
like all of it.
They
They
made
eat
this-
the blood, they eat the intestines,
Every bit of it.
all of it. None of it is wasted.
Yep.
So I think part of the whole thing was I'm assuming this is the deal they made, of course, because we don't understand. We took
She
the
got-
carcass, and she got to
all the
keep
organs.
all the
Yeah.
organs and
So
everything.
that was the benefit for
payment
them.
of
That
helping.
family
Yeah.
got all these organs, and they love the organs.
Yeah.
It's like the
Their favorite
delicacy
part.
there. They take all the organs and they stuff it inside the intestines,
Yeah.
and then make it this delicacy.
But we got to watch this whole process. And, and there's all levels of people in this group, and there's vegetarians, and, but they were all kind of interested in a way. Some of them were hiding their face and didn't want to watch fully, but were still kind of fascinated. Yeah. And it was very interesting to me because Jordan Peterson talks about this fascination that humans have, like with fire specifically. It's like we're drawn to it and we watch it and observe it because it's one thing, it's ever changing and it's new and it's different. And in some ways I felt like that. It's like we were sitting around watching a fire because all of us were so drawn and fascinated by this process we'd never seen before. And we're trying to tell them like few of us had ever seen this happen before, right? And to them, they're just like, we're telling the lady, thanks for letting us watch. And she's like,
what in the world? She's been doing this, I'm confident,
since she was a child.
tiny child and was watching it and then helping early on.
Right.
In fact, they told us that kids there, the nomadic kids start at 3.
Mm-hmm. They have a whole ceremony where okay, let's tangent for a second because that was fascinating too. She talked about how, and I think especially in the older culture, that before the age of 3, and the wording she used, I think it's lost in translation, but it's giving the idea. It's almost like they weren't considered human yet because they could die, right? When death, the mortality rate was high. And so it was at the age of 3 where they're like, okay, now they shaved their head, whether they're male or female, and then they had this whole special ceremony of like, now you are a human, is what the word she used, and now you can participate in the family life. Like you help with chores and you help with this and you help with that, and you
start participating in life, and you start. Obviously they're 3; they don't do much, but the idea is you start teaching them right away from a young age. Hey, you're going to carry your weight. You're going to be part of the family economy.
Yeah, which also interestingly, she's mentioned that the UN has intervened and considered that child slavery, which, okay, I get it. I get where that viewpoint could come from. But at the same time, when you live in a culture like that where your survival depends on
the whole family participating,
the whole family working together, and, okay, even more than that, your survival depends on you knowing these skills.
Exactly.
So the sooner you learn these skills, the better off you're going to be. Yep. And I can imagine, because I also re-listened to Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World. Great book. Love that book. And, if you live in a culture where, and traditionally, one of the reasons Genghis Khan became a leader, a figure, was because the tribes would steal from each other. Wives. They would steal specifically wives. So if your mother or ended up getting kidnapped and your father was killed and you didn't know these skills. I mean, he was 11 when his father died, and his mother had been kidnapped before that, and they got her back. But you had to know these skills to survive. So I think, from my perspective, that's one of the reasons you would do this. Like at 3 years old, you're going to start teaching these skills because that's survival. You will not make it if you don't know these things.
It's so naive and silly and foolish of us from our world of all the luxuries,
our comfort and luxuries.
Gigantic grocery stores with food,
and where none of us have ever even seen an animal killed and processed.
The only meat we've ever seen comes in a package.
Yeah.
And for us, well, they shouldn't be doing that, and
they shouldn't be making children do that.
Kids work. But when you go out and you actually stay the night in their yurt in the middle of nowhere, I mean, we drove for days to get out to these places. That's their world.
Yeah.
That's what they know. That's how they live. And we were there when it was pleasant and wonderful. And it's still tough. But the winters, that far north, I mean, it is a harsh, unforgiving environment. Like you die. You mess up, you die.
Right. The stakes are high. And I think it's often inappropriate for us to make judgments, moral judgments, especially societies like that.
Well, to say that, they should do things like we do things.
Right. Or do things differently. I don't think that that's our place, That's not to say, and I'm not, idealizing it, assuming that all Mongol people are kind and generous and like nice to their children per se. I don't know. I don't know what it's like.
What we do know is they're more family oriented than any other nation I've ever been in.
Yeah.
They
Which,
are all
though,
about
I
family.
do believe they are losing that. Depending, from what I heard from your first trip 5 years ago till now, I feel like they're losing their diet because they're embracing more of the SAD diet, the standard American diet. Yep. And I think they're losing some of their family culture.
It's all because of social media.
Yeah.
They even said that. They said with the prevalence of social media, it's transforming they're losing the good part of their culture.
Well, because one of the things our guide mentioned was that now more young people are seeing social media and they're like, wait a second, there are people who live their entire lives without getting married or having children. Like they didn't know that was a thing. And now they see that as a quote unquote option. And so they're thinking, oh, I'm not going to get married or have kids.
I think that's worth talking about for a second because it's easy on social media to portray the highlight reels
of a single life.
The single carefree life.
Right.
No responsibilities. I do what I want when I want. This is life. And that's being portrayed in many, many ways in not just our society, but many societies. And you can see the allure on the surface of a low responsibility life.
Right.
Like, wow. It's like there's this.
Well, it's like Peter Pan.
Yeah.
Neverland. You never grow up.
Like, why would
There's
I grow
an
up?
allure
We
to
could
that.
just play all the time, have whatever I want, be lazy. Like, why would I work when I could just play? Why would I have responsibilities when I could just live this carefree existence?
And I have legit seen reels on Instagram, and there's a term they have for, I can't remember what it's called, but it's something like a double income, no children couple, and reels of their life. They're like, maybe that's what it is. We're a dink, double income, no children. I don't know. Maybe it's something like that. We're this, and look how amazing it is. And it literally, to me, I'm like,
so sad.
It's not sad. I'm like, you're children still. You are literally children because they're showing all these things they get to do. They're playing and they're staying out late and drinking, and they're like, no nap times, no bedtimes, no, and like they're highlighting all of their lack of responsibility, right? And I'm like, you're still children. Yeah. And like Jordan Peterson says, you can't fully become an adult unless you have children. Because when you have a child, now someone else's life depends on you. That's when you finally grow up.
And it's real work. Like anybody with kids knows it's real work, but it's also real reward.
Yes. Right. More lasting reward than you could ever find in all of the frivolity of fun
One of the greatest things we do in life is to take on more responsibility because it forces us to become more capable. In fact, I would encourage people, because I do it myself, I encourage my clients, take on more responsibility than you can currently handle. Just a little bit more, not a ton more, because you crush yourself, but take on a little bit more responsibility than you can currently handle, and then your option is either sink or swim. And because you want to survive and thrive, you end up learning how to swim, and you literally increase your capacity.
Yeah.
And so at the other side of that, you're now more capable and more competent, and life is better. It's more rewarding. You have more, you can do more, you are more, you've become
You've
more.
become an asset.
Yeah.
Right.
But this frivolous,
Vapid.
frothy existence, there's very little substance, lots of fun and entertainment and no responsibility. From the outside, you're like, that looks amazing. I want to try that. But it's empty.
Well, right. So back to the single people in Mongolia, that's what they're seeing. And this applies to all people on the internet. They're seeing this highlight reel and they think, oh, that looks more attractive.
Yep.
That's what I want to do. But you're missing behind the scenes and the end of life where you reach this point where you're alone. You have nobody.
Utter
Especially
emptiness.
if you also have no relationships, which is more and more common. You've got nobody and you've got nothing. Which kind of, it reminded me of, because there was this part towards the end of our trip in Mongolia where this German lady joined partially for a day because she was beginning a month-long, 35-day adventure exploring through Mongolia with 2 guides that had been with us that then joined her. But that was it. She has no one else. And this isn't, Greg and I don't try to be judgmental for the sake of being judgmental, but we do make judgments based on our understanding of human psychology and relationships and stuff. If you're doing a trip like that, it's most likely because you really don't have anyone in your life that you could do something like that with.
And the contrast couldn't have been more palpable.
Yeah,
because
it was actually huge.
You and I are there
with all of our, not all of our
holding
children,
hands,
5 of our children,
experiencing this wonder together. 5 of our children with us, experiencing it all together,
and all of this group of youth
friends?
that were like lively and fun and playing.
Amazing human beings.
Yeah.
It was one of
And
our
another
favorite
family.
trips. It was
It
just
was great.
solid people. So we're there with our friends. Yeah, another family came. There's just a great group of human beings all together, just embracing the joy and the wonder of adventure and travel and suffering and fun all together. And then to see her just alone. And I talked to her a little bit, and she just wanders the earth alone. And wow.
Well, and
of all the things I suffered when I was out on my own, the hunger and the fear and the desperation and the discouragement and all the pain and suffering and the doubt and the hopelessness and the helplessness, the worst thing I experienced was loneliness. Loneliness is horrible. It is. I think in some ways we could argue it's the supreme suffering. That's why solitary confinement is a thing for the worst people on the planet. What do they do to them? They lock them alone.
right.
Like, it's horrible. And yet some of us inadvertently
Have locked ourselves up.
Yeah, we lock ourselves up. We choose our own solitary confinement. Most often, in my observation, because we don't figure out how to have good relationships.
Yeah, we haven't
don't make the changes to stay in relationships, to
Exactly.
earn the companionship of another quality human being.
Exactly. And that's so true. For too many people, they just view the problem being with, for example, the opposite sex. Like, men are the problem. Or we've heard people say, women are the problem. Being married is too hard. That's why I just got a dog instead. We've literally had people tell us those things.
It's true.
It is true.
A dog is way easier than a wife.
Exactly, right.
Yeah. If I'm trying to avoid responsibility and pain and frustration
And go for the easy
difficulty
path.
of living with a woman,
Right.
yeah, I'll take
I'm picking a dog.
all day long.
That's why it's called man's best friend.
Exactly. It's like, yeah, the dog's always happy to see you, even though you're lame.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
even though you're angry, you can beat the dog
But
and
a
the dog will wag
woman
its
is
tail.
not.
Yeah.
She expects you to be more. She expects you to be your best self.
Yeah.
So that is the challenge of relationships. You're dealing with another person. And the problem is people want someone who will just love me the way I am. That is not what relationships are.
No.
Relationships will challenge you to become a better version of
That's
yourself.
interesting. That's really good because that is another form of this avoiding responsibility. It's we don't think about it that way. It doesn't, we couldn't articulate that. But desiring, if I want you to just love me just as I am, to accept me as I am, and not have any requirements of me, that's another form of avoiding responsibility. Avoiding, facing the challenges, difficulties, facing my own weaknesses, doing the hard work. I'm like, woman, just stop. Just let me be what I am. You should just love me as I am. And for the record, before we even got married, long before
We were engaged, I think.
Were we engaged when we
I
talked
think
about
so.
it? I was like, babe, I will never, ever ask you to love me as I am. Because that's just a cop-out.
Well,
It's just
and
a weak way to face life.
it is another way that people lock themselves in solitary confinement because I think, if I could make up a little story about this German lady, because I really have no idea about her in particular, but, I can imagine that she's had relationships with men and expected them to just accept her for how she is and who she is with all of her, whatever her little things are.
We'll call them idiosyncrasies.
Right. And again, this is a fictional story that
We've seen
is
pieces
too
of,
often
we've seen this
played out.
over
Yeah.
20 years as we travel
Exactly.
all over the world.
And the reality is, if you continue to live like that and to insist that others love you for the way you are, flaws and warts and all, that you never better yourself so that you can actually stay in a relationship with another person, because that's ultimately what is required. You have to make changes and you have to become a better version of yourself. And that's a good thing. It's
Very
not a
good
bad thing.
It's a very good thing.
Now, the other part of it is you have to also gain the skills of relationships. And that's where another reason where people fail. They haven't gained relationship skills.
And you have to, but that's the requirement.
Yeah.
Because if you get into a relationship, you either have to gain skills or you're going to suffer and it'll end.
Right.
Those really are the options.
Exactly.
You got two paths. If you want a relationship, you get into a relationship, you either better figure out how to do it well so it's tolerable and even enjoyable. Like if you want a phenomenal relationship, you have to just keep leveling up.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, this is great. If you can gain a small skill set and be like, we tolerate each other. Or you're just like, no, you will end up fighting, miserable, and separated.
Right.
Like whether it's a friendship or a marriage or whatever, or even with your own kids. You don't figure this out, the end result is separation. I have to tell a story of that. I had this phenomenal human being reach out for me for some coaching. Genuinely a great man. Like, just love this guy. And we have. I told Rachel a few weeks ago, like it's very rare that you meet somebody that you have so much alignment with in so many ways, like fundamentally from marriage and parenting and business and life view. I mean, it's really rare. And we just have so much alignment with this guy. And he reached out. We were talking and doing some coaching. And ultimately, it was because his wife is just a go-getter. And just, well, I was telling him that she's like you. And just high standards, self-respecting, competent, capable. And with all of that comes high standards and demands. Like, you're not going to allow me to just slack off. I can't go to you and be like, no, babe, let's just take it easy.
I could never see you
Life's-
ever doing that.
Right. But life's just meant to be enjoyed. Just let me have a few of my little lazy, like, it's never going to happen. And even when I'm putting forth the effort, like he was sharing, he's like, look, I'm putting in the work, man. And she comes over and she's like, yeah, it's a little bit shoddy. That's your best? I don't think you're trying your best. And it's just for a man, because if a man who loves a woman, that woman's words carry weight. And the slightest thing you say gets in my head and stays there. And so if I'm busting my tail, I feel like, yeah, I'm crushing. And you walk over and you're like, ugh, have you started working on this yet? And you're like, I've been working on this for weeks, woman. Like, this was my best effort. And you're like, ugh. It looks like a child did that. You haven't even started working on it. Like, that's the biggest kick in the nuts, right? And he had experience like that. He's like, I thought I was doing so great. My wife said one little thing, it just shattered my confidence. I'm like, yeah, I get it, right? Because it has that weight. But that's the right thing. Now, I know men who purposely seek out women who have no self-respect because it's easier.
Because there's no high standards.
She won't make demands of him. If she tries, he'll just kind of pressure her, make her cower, and like, oh, no, you don't, woman. And okay. And she's so desperate and clingy and needy and lacks self-respect. And so she's willing to tolerate his idiosyncrasies, right? Or his just pathetic behavior.
Right.
But a strong one won't tolerate that at all. And many men cannot or will not handle, rise up to the demands of a self-respecting woman. Now, we're not talking about a tyrant or a dictator or a crazy
Sometimes
woman.
it's a fine line.
There's a fine line. No, it's true. There's this fine line between a woman, holding high standards and becoming just an absolute tyrant. We're not talking about that. But I think this is fitting in this whole idea of like, no, if you want a good relationship, buckle up.
Right.
You're going to have to do the work.
Yeah, on both sides.
And
Absolutely.
It's exhausting and demanding, and we'd druther not, right? You get in the druthers. You'd rather not do it, but what's the alternative?
Right. Well, it's a form of solitary confinement, really, is the alternative. And that to me is, what I see when people are alone. And it's not to judge them as being a bad person, because it has nothing to do with being a good or bad person. You can be a great person, but if you don't have the skills and you're not willing to make changes, and sometimes that's why people don't. They're like, I am a good person. Why should I change? And that's not the point. Being a good person has nothing to do with whether or not you can improve.
Exactly. Or having a specific skill set.
Right.
I was working with another coaching client, same thing. It's like super, super good guy and struggling with specific aspects of parenting. It's like, yeah, dude, this has nothing to do with you and you being a great guy.
Right.
It is a very specific set of skills.
Exactly.
And you have to develop. If you want certain outcomes with your kids as a parent, you have to get a very specific set of skills and tools that makes that work. But you're right. I think we often connect that with like, well, I'm a good person, or if I'm failing, then I'm a bad person. It's like, no, it's
not connected.
Really
it just has to do with the skills you have not developed, really.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was kind of a tangent. I don't know if there was something else you wanted to say about the goat.
It was just delicious. It was,
it was actually the most delicious goat I've had.
They took the entire goat. They built this bonfire up in the. You guys, look at our Instagram and see the pictures. It was this.
We were sitting on this little kind of plateau area with a view below us of the lake and the mountains and the sun setting, and they made a big bonfire. They put rocks in the fire. Then they had this giant, I don't know what else to call it, but like a giant milk can. It was like a metal milk can.
Though, they threw the entire goat in the fire.
Well, they threw the goat in the fire to
and we're like,
burn off the skin.
They burn off all the skin. They scrape it out and wash it.
Then they scraped it all off. Then they cut it up into pieces, like just random chunks of pieces. And then they layered it alternatively with the hot rocks from the fire, some potatoes and carrots, which they throw in for the tourists, and then the chunks of goat. And then they put like a whole bag of salt in there, practically. I mean, it was a big can. It was like 3 feet tall or something.
Yep. So like, it's like the old school metal milk jug.
It was ultimately like a pressure cooker. Like they made an Instapot that they cooked on the fire. Yeah. So then they put it on there and they cooked it for, I don't know, an hour maybe. And then they pulled it out and they handed out goat pieces to us.
First they hand you one of the hot rocks.
They hand you a hot rock that's supposed to like sanitize your hands with a hot rock.
And it was scalding hot, black, covered with ashes, and covered with goat grease.
Goat grease.
So your hands are a mess
ready to eat the goat.
Yep.
And
then they just hand you chunks of meat and bone, and
it was really good. The only part I did not like was the goat skin. Not a fan of that. And it was funny because actually then the next day for lunch they cut up the goat skin into tiny little pieces and threw it into our soup.
We fed like 30 people that night. Everyone was stuffed. Then there was a little bit more for breakfast, some of us had, and then again for lunch fed the group. One goat.
With one goat.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
And to see that happen in real time, like this is how they do life. It was really cool and delicious. It was so good.
But they did try to hide the goat skin as like mushroom. It
tiny
kind of
little
looked like
pieces.
mushrooms in the soup. And I don't like mushrooms anyway, so I just gave them to you, but it was actually goat skin.
Yeah, it was funny. We had a couple of little incidences where people came off horses. These are not your little trained trail
This was
ponies.
not a
This is
trail ride in the United States.
Right.
This was a full out, I mean,
was
they're
a-
almost wild
it was a rodeo.
horses because we didn't get started on the trail ride for a couple hours because they were rounding up the horses. I mean, they're
trying
just
to
out
get-
in the wild.
Yeah.
And yeah, they were wild.
It was amazing.
It was a
And-
real adventure and a real horse ride.
and
I'm grateful that we
seven
are all
people in our
safe.
group came off, including me twice.
Yeah, you came off twice, your horse.
Once was one of those Hollywood scenes
Yeah.
where our daughter, the horses took off running. We were racing across this valley, and
She should not have been
everybody-
caught up in it
No,
because
she-
those who were not going to gallop had pulled off. Somehow she was still in the group that was going to
and
gallop.
I didn't know she was there.
I didn't know either. I didn't know where
And
she was.
so we all
She's
took off
10.
running, and her horse took off running, and she, in fear, leaned forward to try to hold on to the horse's neck. And so she kicked her feet back up. She just didn't know what to do. And so she's holding on for dear life and just bouncing, horizontal to the horse's back. And I glance back, and I'm like, oh, man, she's not staying on that horse. So then her horse ran past me at a full sprint. And so I guided my horse, kicked my horse, and guided it over right next to her. And I got right next to her right as she bounced off the horse. So she bounces midair. I just reach out with my left hand and grab her out of the air. I grab her jacket. Well, then I can't, she's 10 years old and heavy. Like I couldn't just, I've lost the ability to hold her in the air like that. So I bail off my horse, and he's at a full run, full sprint. So I jump off my horse, and we both go down together under the ground. And we rolled and drug her through the dirt and fields, and luckily.
But amazingly, she had no bumps or bruises or
nothing.
scrapes.
I scratched her face along the.
But there
the-
was
the
nothing I could
Mongolian
see.
steppe.
I know. I mean, she complained a little bit of like a dirt rash,
Right.
but I couldn't see anything. So
Then I grabbed her, I
it was
scooped her up, I
amazing.
just comforted her. She was just terrified
Yeah.
out of her mind, right? And just, and I'm like, you're good, you're safe, everything's good.
And then, of course, she got back on the horse.
Well, we had to. We're like, hey, we're getting right back up. We're getting on the horse.
And
we're
rode back
running
to camp.
And she's like, oh, I'm okay. And I'm like, you're not afraid to get back on? She's like, no, it wasn't the horse's fault. It was
Yeah,
awesome
it was
psychology.
good.
She's like, it wasn't the horse's fault. Why would I not get back on the horse? The horse has nothing to do with what just happened. I was like, yes, girl.
Yeah.
So we got right back on and loved it.
And when we got back to camp, I did spend some time with her in the tent processing, and she cried through it, and it was good because she was able to articulate the fears that she had, and one of them was like, I don't want to gallop again. And I'm like, yeah, great. You need to gain the skills of being able to gallop before you do that again, and that's okay. You could spend many years, if you wanted, riding a horse at a trot or a walk, no problem.
Yep.
And and that was her biggest concern. Like, I don't want to have to gallop again. We're like, you don't have to. That's not a skill.
case,
That's
I want-
not a skill you
I
have
wanna
yet.
get back
You
up-
don't have
get
to
her back
gallop.
on the horse because it was one. Okay, speaking of skill sets, it was one specific skill. Had she leaned back instead of leaned forward, she would have been just laughing and giddy and smiling on that sprint across the valley.
Right. And it was simply because she didn't have that skill. Because honestly, I mean, she rode horses in Turkey on a trail ride, but
Nah, it
otherwise,
doesn't
this
count.
is her first time.
Yep. It was awesome, you guys.
Yeah.
It was amazing. So then after that, we spent 3 days in China. China is something else. I mean, I like it. I like Beijing. It's beautiful and great infrastructure. We went out to a less touristy, less
Part of the
popular
wall.
part of the wall of China.
Yeah,
So
by a lake.
like there weren't any tourists out there. It was just locals and no English.
Chinese
really.
tourists.
Yeah, and it was awesome. But man,
It was
so
it was
hot.
a unique experience. I also think China was challenging. I think it's probably one of those more challenging places to visit as a foreigner because it is completely opposite from the Western world. Like, and this is something we were talking about with our kids. Like it's almost like the whole operating system of China is completely opposite from what we know. So we use Google Maps and we use Uber and we use all these different things.
We use credit
None of
cards.
that. And we use credit cards.
And
None of that exists
Yep.
in China. So we had a hard time paying for things because they didn't accept, some places did, but few places accepted our credit
very few,
cards.
yep.
So we had to learn how to download their apps. They use Alipay and
WeChat.
WeChat.
Which was awesome. It was a fun experience.
It was. It
look,
was.
There's billions of people here operating on a completely different system. Let's just figure out how their system works and see if we can use it.
Yeah.
And so that was a cool experience for
It
our whole
was.
family
It was
to
still
navigate
frustrating
that.
because it didn't always work
Yeah.
for us because for some reason over a certain amount it didn't like our cards.
American
It wanted a
cards.
Chinese credit card. So, but yeah, just
And then restaurants.
And
Restaurants were
interesting.
hard. There was restaurants everywhere, and we're like, yeah, let's just get
but
some
they were
great
all
food.
Chinese
It
restaurants.
was
And it was not the Chinese
different food.
we were
man.
used to.
And we did
Exactly.
eat at one fancy place that we accidentally found, and it was fantastic. Like the meals were done so well, so well on the little sea right near the Forbidden.
Yeah.
City.
Yeah, that was nice.
That was
and
awesome.
we did. We happened upon it by accident.
Yeah, it was so good. But a great experience, and then a day in Qatar on the way home,
Yes.
which it was like 45 degrees there.
45 degrees Celsius, which is about 100, 110,
I think it's
115.
120-ish. I don't know.
I think 50 degrees Celsius is like 122
Okay.
or something.
Yeah. So it was, anyways, it
was
was
hot
great, beautiful.
And
But
humid.
so
Not
wealthy,
humid there. It was humid
so
in
wealthy,
China.
so well developed. So, I mean, it reminds me of Dubai.
Yeah.
Just beautiful, beautiful buildings and structure. And our hotel was off the charts.
Yeah, our
with the-
hotel was amazing, and I booked it because it was one of the cheaper places for our group size in Doha, the capital. But man, the breakfast that came included with it was one of the best breakfasts I've ever
Yeah,
seen.
it was incredible.
And we had some great breakfast in Norway. Like this was a really good
It was
breakfast.
great, and it's right on the water. Doha is right on the water, and the water color, the turquoise, the beaches, the buildings. It was awesome. It was just a really great experience.
Yeah, it was. And I don't know why, if this is just my nature, but when I go to places like that, I do sometimes wonder one of those little scenarios like The Giver or Panem in Hunger Games. Like, is it one of those places where it's really dystopian, but on the surface everything looks amazing? I don't know. This is just a
Yeah, we know nothing.
we
Don't
have
spend enough
we know
time.
nothing about it,
But
but
we
sometimes I'm like, it's so perfect. It's almost too perfect.
in that place particularly, massive amounts of immigrants.
Well, there was also a lot of immigrants in Dubai as well, I noticed. So
Yes.
a lot of Pakistanis and stuff, they're Indians, but there were a lot of Africans.
Our taxi. Oh man, you guys, we were in a storm. There was a thunderstorm in Beijing. We sat in the airplane at the airport for 5
At the gate.
hours. At the gate. We didn't even move.
For 5 hours, we
of a
sat on the plane
thunderstorm.
and then had to take a 9-hour flight. So we were on that plane for 13 hours. It was miserable.
It was rough. And then we got to our hotel like 4 a.m.
Yeah.
in Doha. But our driver that morning was from Tanzania.
Yeah.
And we'd just been in Tanzania in February, so we talked to him. It was fun. And then the next morning, the guy was from Uganda.
Mm-hmm.
One of the neighbors was from, neighbors, I say neighbors in the hotel. He was from, I forgot already, some
Can't help you.
awesome place around the world. And he was there working in the banking industry, Lebanon.
Oh, lovely.
And then another lady was from Ukraine. She had left when the war started, and she'd been in Doha since. And it was interesting. It was fun to talk to her about the war that's still going on in Ukraine. And she said it's just absolutely horrendous. It's still happening, and yet
no more news about it.
news. Nobody talks about it, and the suffering, the terrible things keep happening. Yet, the news cycle just moves on to what's next, like
Like the Paris Olympics.
or
Or-
the weird things happening at the Olympics, or
The attempted assassination of Donald Trump.
what that was all about. Like, who
Which,
knows?
yeah, so you got some sort of little message. We were in the middle of Mongolia when that happened, when you got a notification from someone that it had occurred. We didn't know any details, of course, but
Still, even all the details we quote do know are being fed to us through media outlets. And you guys,
My
okay,
only
this
thought
sounds
is,
so crazy, but it has to be said. Like, we live in a place where it's propaganda.
okay,
Like,
well, the
so
fact is,
if you think, hold on, I want to just drive this home. If you think because you're in the United States of America or you're in Europe or whatever, like propaganda doesn't happen in these countries. It only happens in communist countries or whatever. No, man. We, I hope you don't think, oh, it's all conspiracy theory, whatever. I'm being absolutely sincere. We're sitting right now, this year, in this world of propaganda. It is weird and dystopian and real. And we
well,
all need to be aware that it's happening.
yeah, well, I recently heard someone say, and I think that's true, like propaganda exists everywhere all the time, and it's not necessarily a negative thing. Like it has a negative connotation, the word itself. But anyone who's telling you anything, in essence, that is propaganda. It's essentially someone trying to convince you of their viewpoint. So it exists already. It's already there. It's not like it doesn't happen. It does happen.
The kind of
Motives
propaganda
behind
that's happening
it.
now, I think people are trying to. They're trying to, put the what's the saying? Put the wool over. Where do
Pull
those?
the wool over your eyes.
Yeah, where do these sayings come from? We've been
don't
saying
know.
that since I was a kid. I wonder what it means. Anyways, there's deception, massive amounts of deception going on right now, and we need to be aware of that.
Yeah.
And just be heads up, like, okay, and both sides.
And this is not us saying that the attempted assassination of Trump was, what was the word you just used?
I don't know.
Not that it's fake per se, or it's being acted out as some sort of propaganda. We're just saying we don't really know what's going on in America. That's how I feel ultimately. I have no clue. It's hard to tell what's happening, but what I can tell is happening is weird stuff. Like things are not normal. That's all I can say. Things are not normal. Like there's crazy things going on where you're just like, what? What the heck? What is going on here?
Yep.
That's mostly what I have to say about it. Is
Agreed. I hope that all of you listening, I think we can all just agree, like, okay, strange things are happening.
yeah,
Like,
strange things are happening.
These are weird times, interesting
Exactly.
times. There's and let the strange things be a warning to us all that they're symptoms of underlying problems.
Exactly.
Let's
right.
be aware there's underlying problems. Now, I know. Let me throw out a little warning here, because I know some of you. Okay, in our listening audience, right? Some of you are going to be like, I know exactly what's going on. Evil tried to stop Trump, but God protected him. Right? And then other sides are like, no, it's Trump's the devil. That's why God sent a messenger to kill him.
Does the other side believe in the devil?
Oh, maybe not. He's the epitome. I don't know. Like we take these sides, and then we get so convicted that we know what's happening. And there's always so much going on behind the scenes that we got to say, well, nah, I don't know. Like, I have already read several different accounts behind just the shooting. An example. It's like, whoa, there's 100%, there's some conspiracy stuff going on. I don't know which side it's on or for what motives or what. But and this isn't conspiracy theory, this is conspiracy. There's conspiracy going on, and I don't know to what end. I don't know the details. I don't know if we ever will.
I think the same, well, we will in like 20 or 30 years when it comes out and they make a movie or something. But I think the same on Biden's side. Like here, President Biden, we all see him declining in capability. And
like his physical mental abilities were shot months ago, if not more.
Yeah.
And everyone's wondering, like, how is this guy still in the race?
Right. And then suddenly here he is in the debate. He does a horrible job. And, oh, yeah, now the left acknowledges it. And let's just put Kamala in his place. And, like, how and why does that happen?
Yeah.
If someone's running for president, why should he just be replaced by someone else?
Right.
Like, if he can't run anymore, he should just drop out.
Right, and somebody else should take
makes
his
no
place.
sense to me.
And hold on, this is starting to sound like we're getting political, or we're in favor of one of those guys over the other.
I am by default of
What? Who are you in
If I
favor of?
had to vote, I would vote for Trump only because Biden's not capable.
Right. Okay, but he's
But
out.
not
He's
that
out.
Trump is, he wouldn't be my first choice if I had to pick among everyone in the world. I wouldn't pick Trump, that's for sure.
That's for very sure. I,
And
I
I have a hard time voting for someone who's not one of the major candidates because I just really feel like they don't have a chance, unfortunately, because I think that our system is just,
it's so
it doesn't work as
yeah.
it should work.
This isn't political. I know some of you are going to be feeling some frustration, anger at us that we're not in favor of your party line or your candidate, whatever. I don't know. I think if I had to pick somebody right now in the running, I'd probably pick Kennedy. He seems
Yeah,
like
no,
the
and
most
I
solid
agree.
guy.
I could vote for Kennedy for
Yep.
sure. I think he's a good option. There's that other guy, the Indian guy. I can't remember his name.
Yep. Cool. Anyways, but this isn't political. This isn't taking
Everything's
sides.
political.
That's true. It's all political. But I'm not sitting here saying one's better than the other. I'm just saying we live in weird times. Like strange things are happening. And
Dystopian times. I think legit, it's dystopian.
Yep. And I think it's important for all of us to be aware that when strange things are happening, that really strange and consequential results are coming. They're on the horizon. So it doesn't matter what happens, which one of these clowns gets in. Like there's big stuff in play right now that will be coming in the next few years where there's going to be some massive consequences. You guys have heard us talk about the fourth turning. If you have not read that yet, the fourth turning is here or is now. Read that book so you have an understanding of the historical
Which is the updated
pattern.
version of the book they wrote back in the 80s.
In the 90s,
wasn't it? 80s or 90s, yeah.
So it's a real deal. It's a historical pattern. It's just interesting times. So that's where we're at in the world. And the best thing we can do is to prepare ourselves and prepare our families. So
Okay, which actually reminds me, because we were talking about this before. I mean, as part of building relationships, it's essentially making yourself into an asset. And that is something that I think is a core philosophy to our approach to parenting, to marriage, to life in general. It's about becoming an asset. You have to make yourself into an asset, meaning you bring more value into this world than you take from it. And too many people today are liabilities. They really are. They just exist as a liability to society, to their families, to themselves. So you have to be intentional about gaining the skills and the training and the education to be an asset to yourself, to your family, to your community. And that right there is what ultimately makes a difference. That's going to make the difference in your marriage. It's going to make the difference in your parenting. It's going to make a difference when hard times come, because they're coming. And
even in your own lifestyle and your enjoyment
absolutely.
of life.
Absolutely. It totally does. And so, but it reminded me also that we're calling it an asset training, for lack of a better
I'm
phrase.
so excited about
Yes, we're
this.
having an asset training here at the World School Family Resort in November. It's meant to be for anyone, really, men, women, teens over the age of 16, probably, because we're going to do some like simulations where we have this awesome friend that we have that's coming who has tons of medical skills and training. And
So we're going to do like emergency medical training, so you know how to stop bleeding and help with respiration and accidents, like just how to if basically it's first aid, and so you don't have to have any experience.
but like kind of a wilderness first aid
Right.
or a
or austere environment, like
Yeah.
you're the first one on scene, and you need to help somebody.
and you have to improvise a little
Yeah,
bit. You know,
exactly.
it's not like you have this amazing first aid kit, which he's going to teach you about a kit you can put together,
Yep.
but you're not a trained professional per se.
Right, you don't have an ambulance at your
Yeah, exactly.
in your backpack, so you got to figure out how to do it. And then we're going to do combatives and self-defense, how to defend yourself or protect others. Like
Teaching about-
more and more crime is happening all the time, all over the world.
Yeah.
Like it's getting weird again, and
Well,
society's
and
unraveling.
that was the history of the world. Like we have lived through a relatively peaceful period of time where you're not afraid for your life every single day, and it's not a matter of survival.
But that has been extremely
that's
rare in the
the-
history of the world.
Yeah,
like you're saying.
rarity.
Yeah.
So it's important for us to understand things. We're going to be discussing ideas like now I can't. I'm talking about when violence is the answer, and he talks about the different
so
types
good.
of violence. What are the names?
Yeah.
They totally blanked me.
I don't know. I can't
there's
remember.
two different types of violence. One of them is,
You talking about?
no, it's asocial
Oh
and
yeah,
social violence.
yeah.
So social violence is essentially this idea that if you're going to get in a fight with someone,
There's rules.
there's rules.
Yeah.
Even if nobody talks about them, there's certain rules. You're not going to do something that is permanently damaging to this person.
Right.
Unless you are a psychopath or a crazy person, and then that's asocial violence because you are willing to do things that will permanently hurt or damage or kill someone, right? And if unless and I'm bringing that up because to me that's a very important distinction that I really didn't understand before I read this book, that we have to understand. And so we're going to talk through some of that because it's important, I think, especially for women. I think it's important for us to understand some of these things so that we can protect ourselves first by preventing things from going wrong, preventing potential violence, and then when necessary, if necessary, using violence to our benefit so that we can be safe
Yep.
and not end up
Or we can help somebody
dead or
else
worse.
who's being threatened.
Exactly.
So
right.
we'll learn how to use everyday weapons, and
Improvised weapons.
especially in the context of travel, how to travel safely.
Yeah.
What you can take with you and how to handle travel situations. How to if you're in a situation where there's some chaos, some riots, or even just a natural disaster. We're going to walk through these things
Which-
of how
which-
to be an asset.
Which happens. I mean, it has happened to us, and it's happened to us more lately in the last couple of few years than it has all the previous years of traveling we did. Like, we traveled for a decade or more with very little encounter with violence. But in the last 3 years, I can think of multiple situations where we were actually in a dangerous situation or close to one, like, last year or even this year. It was this year. We drove to France and we happened to drive through the area where
riotings, yeah.
there had been a lot of rioting because of all kinds of other crazy things going on with the farmers and the food chain and all of the stuff happening. But they were rioting and we drove through, like, we had to get off the main freeway because it was closed down because of the rioting. And we pulled up right where there was a riot happening. There was fires on the sides of the road and all kinds of piles of trash and stuff burning. Like, it was, those are potentially dangerous situations simply because humans who are rioting can be unstable and don't always follow the same rules that we're used to in normal social interactions. So we need to be aware that that's a potential danger and how to protect ourselves.
That's a great example of rioters and mobocracy is what it's been called. They become asocial in the moment. They don't think clearly. They get caught up in the mentality of the mob
and all the rioting that's happening in the United States with, pro-Palestine and all of that going on. Like, that is, in a way, it's a form of mobocracy for sure, and there's potential danger there.
Yep. So we need to be capable. So we're going to teach you guys how to break out of zip ties and duct tape, which are the most common restraints now. Teach you what happens when you try to break a glass bottle and use it as a weapon, and we'll teach you how to
all kinds of fun things.
Descend out of a 2-story room with bed sheets, and this is going to be awesome. It is going to be awesome.
All by trained professionals.
Yep. So please mark your calendars. It's the
week before
Thanksgiving in southern Portugal. So you fly into Lisbon or into Faro. It's kind of an application process again. So reach out, let us know if you're interested. It's going to fill up fast. And you get to stay here, get the training, have an awesome, I think it's 4 or 5 days, 5 days. And it's just going to be fantastic. The goal is you will leave here a much more capable person than when you arrived in several different ways. It's going to be awesome. So yeah, got to be an asset.
Yeah.
Absolutely have to be an asset. And I love what you were saying there a moment ago. Just that idea of being a liability where you just consume and take and you desperately need other people and you're dependent on them. So which means you become a burden to other people because you lack self-reliance. And I think socially that's a big problem. But even in relationships and families, it's a big problem. Every single person should be adding value. And if you're at a point right now where you're not adding that much value, don't beat yourself up about it. Just get to work
Right.
and make yourself more self-reliant first, and then so capable that not only can you easily take care of yourself, you can actually start taking care of others.
Right. Well, and I think there's a lot of factors for why this is the case, but an extreme example of what it has led to is these things I'll see on social media of these women who are pretty much, I'll say, clueless, touting boldly how they don't need men in their lives. And yet they don't realize that the entire reason they can even make that statement is because of all the men and people in their lives who have built a society that's safe enough that they can function on their own. Women can function on their own. They can have a job, they can earn money, they can go out and go shopping and get food. Like, they can survive because society is safe now. But behind the scenes, there are men who are fixing the sewer lines, installing the power lines, fixing the internet when it goes down, fixing the power lines when they break and there's a storm. Behind the scenes, there are men, usually it's men doing these jobs, harvesting all the food,
in another country,
transporting it
shipping
across the country in semis.
Or
There
in
are
cargo
so
ships
many,
that are being attacked by pirates.
Exactly.
Yeah. How many women are you going to find on a cargo ship?
Right. The dirtiest, hardest, most uncomfortable jobs in society are done by men.
So that women can saying,
comfortably say,
men.
I don't need a man in my life, because your entire life is supported by the men behind the scenes.
Exactly.
So that's an extreme version of where this type of thinking has gone, but there's many levels of it. Yeah, we need people who are assets and who are doing the work that makes our lives possible. And so if we can't find some way to contribute back, we are just a liability, and it's not good for society as a whole.
I saw a video recently, a very disturbing video, but I want to share it because I think it's relevant. A pedophile, predator who preyed on children was caught, and he was being interrogated and interviewed. And when asked why he would approach some children and not others, his answer was that if the father seemed threatening, he would avoid that child. And that hit home.
Oh, absolutely.
These absolute sickos who are seeking out children to molest and abuse, they're watching, and his reasoning, which makes perfect sense. These guys are cowards and bullies, and they're looking for prey. They're looking for easy prey. And they're afraid of men. Like
real men.
Real men.
Manly men.
Men who are threatening.
Manly men.
Yep. And that was his head. He's like, oh, well, if the father seemed threatening, I wouldn't approach that child. And that right there is
huge.
It's massive.
That's huge, because how many manly men are missing in society today?
Yeah.
Too many. Not only are fathers missing from the home more in general, but too many men have become effeminate. Yep. And they're not manly.
And they're not tough.
And they're not threatening.
In any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And so they look, and I don't know why. I have some thoughts and ideas, but I think we can all agree there's just been a massive push for the last couple of decades to make men weak. And I don't know who's doing it or why or what's happening.
This is conspiracy right here.
Men have become weak.
Right.
And they're not threatening. And now predators are becoming more prevalent and more aggressive, and not stopping because there's a man there. They're only stopping if the man is actually threatening.
Yes.
And they look like, oh, that guy couldn't do anything or wouldn't do anything. And so that's just one example, but there's many, many examples, I think, where being tough, being assets, and this goes for men and women, because women can be very threatening and very violent and very tough and very capable. But we have to be assets, and we have to be competent and confident and capable to keep evil at bay.
Yeah.
Because if we cower, then evil spreads. That's just the story of humanity, and every movie and every book and every great classic.
And the history of the world.
Yeah, it's just the story of life, that when good doesn't stand up and fight back, evil just spreads without restraint. So we got to be better.
Have to
Got to
be
be stronger.
assets.
Got to be assets. Love it. Okay, you guys, thanks. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being awesome. Thanks for caring about being the best version of yourself and being an asset for your family, and leaning into your relationships and your family legacy, which is without a doubt, I think, the most rewarding and wonderful thing we can do in life.
An important thing.
Yeah, so important. Love you guys. Reach upward.